the BART strike, the fight for black liberation and a shameful, bureaucratic exclusion. There is a crisis of revolutionary leadership in labor Black America. The capitalist class and their stooge politicians in the Democratic Party and the Republican Party have carried out assaults on the rights of the working class and minorities of color, foremost the black population. Last year's BART strike presented an opportunity for the partisans of the oppressed to turn the situation around and realize a meaningful victory. What follows are a compilation of leaflets and articles reflecting the political intervention of Humanist Workers for Revolutionary Socialism (HWRS) and Labor, Black and Brown LBB in the 2013 BART strike. October 8, 2013. Leaflet from the Humanist Workers for Revolutionary Socialism, all out for a massive strike until victory is ours. As the strike deadline of October 10 looms only 2 days away, the BART bosses, their capitalist backers, and their strike breakers and police are ready. Are we? This strike will not just be about money, or even safety and working conditions. It is compelled by current historical circumstances to become a political strike. The local and state governments, as the servants of the capitalists of the Bay Area and nationwide, are determined to break the spine of our unions. The Bay Area is one of the last remaining organized labor strongholds in the United States. If we want to preserve it, labor had better wake up. The bosses have already had 2 decisive victories in the Midwest. In Wisconsin, they have sharply limited public workers' right to collective bargaining, and forced public worker unions to get recertified annually, and to collect dues directly instead of through payroll deductions. In Michigan, where the auto unions and the CIO were born, after bloody confrontations with the state, they have imposed a right to work or open shop law that undermines the entire historical strength of the unions. The bosses already know that the coming BART strike is political. We had better realize it too. We are in a fight for our lives. We need to announce clearly to the public and the union's allies that it is a new day, and workers will no longer tolerate attacks on our right to the compensation and benefits we deserve. This struggle is not just for BART workers, it is for all workers. The unions alone cannot beat the bosses. To win, we need mass support from the working class communities. The unions can muster that support by turning this struggle into a political strike against union busting, police murder, and Islamic terror. There are 3 fundamental requirements for victory. 1. The 3 unions must have a unified joint strike committee, elected from the rank-and-file members, and subject to recall by the rank-and-file, if it does not do its job. Such a committee would be trusted by the members, and could meet on a daily basis, to direct the strike like the command center of a fighting army. It could mobilize massive picket lines, to enforce the fundamental fighting essence of trade unionism, that the current union misleaders and unfortunately, many workers as well appear to have forgotten. Picket lines mean you don't cross them, and scabs who try to cross the lines must, and will be stopped by any means necessary. It was this kind of militant picket line that enabled the unions to organize, and to win good contracts in the past, and it is their absence that is in large part responsible for the decline of the unions over the last several decades. A militant rank-and-file strike committee could dispatch militant picketers to all areas that need shoring up and support. For example, the BART bosses have been training scabs at Mare Island, and the unions have been unable to stop them. If we had a militant strike committee that could speak with authority to the rank-and-file, it could dispatch workers, joined by their supporters from the oppressed communities, to set up a picket line, and stop the would-be scabs from training. A rank-and-file strike committee also would not let the firing of a union supporter like BART station agent George Figueroa pass, without organizing a mass mobilization to defend him. The union leaders do not want a militant rank-and-file strike committee, and they are doing their best to avoid any strike, much less a militant one. These bureaucrats have already signaled very clearly to the capitalist politicians that they are trying to avoid a strike. This is like telling your enemy in a war that you don't want to use your only really effective weapon. We cannot trust bureaucrats like these to carry out the kind of struggle we need to wage in order to win. We must form a rank-and-file strike committee, even if we have to do it against the will of the union leadership and without their support. Because time is running out, it is not enough just to talk about a strike committee. If a strike committee is not already elected and ready to go by October 10th, the first day that the unions can strike, according to the bosses, the workers will be deprived of a basic tool to win the strike, and the bosses and their politicians will have their first victory. Unfortunately, the Transport Workers Solidarity Committee (TWSC), the only independent solidarity committee involved in the current BART struggle, has merely talked about a strike committee. It has done nothing practical to help form one. That is because TWSC does not dare to defy the union bureaucracy on this issue. When supporters of Humanist Workers for Revolutionary Socialism (HWRS) and Labor Black and Brown (LBB) asked TWSC, at their last meeting, to call for a meeting of rank-and-file workers from the three BART unions, to discuss the formation of a strike committee, the leftists, who run TWSC, did not show any interest in doing that. There were BART workers and one union official at the meeting. If each of those people had actively and vocally campaigned within their own union for a joint meeting, to discuss the formation of a rank-and-file strike committee, we are confident that dozens of workers, who are angry at the do-nothing bureaucrats, would have shown up for such a meeting. This would have been the first crucial step for the formation of a strike committee. The bottom line is that without a militant, elected strike committee, the workers will lose the war against BART management and its armed police, who will try to break the strike. Striking without such a committee is like going to a war with a leadership that is incapable of mobilizing and directing the troops in a way that can lead to victory. A massive strike is a political and military war, and workers must be prepared accordingly. 2. We need a mass mobilization of the working class communities, and in particular, of the oppressed black and brown communities. To win, the unions must mobilize the oppressed communities, to contribute their militance and strength to the picket lines. How? If the unions take steps to defend the oppressed working class communities against the rampant police brutality and murder that are victimizing them, then they will see the BART strike as their struggle. Common actions on the picket lines between BART workers and the oppressed communities will be a de facto first step toward establishing defense guards against attacks on the unions and against police brutality. Mobilizing the oppressed communities will inevitably make this a political strike. By sending union members to defend the communities against police attacks and brutality, the unions would make it clear that this is a political strike for the sake and benefit of the entire working class. In return, the unions would be guaranteed thousands of black and brown workers and youth on the picket lines and on the streets fighting for victory. Recently, union leaders have started to talk about the need for solidarity with the oppressed communities, but they have done nothing concrete to mobilize the oppressed workers and youth. Instead, the bureaucracy stages phony rallies, at which they allow Democratic Party politicians to speak. The Democrats and the Republicans alike are enemies of the workers. The bureaucrats have given hot air speeches saying that unions need the support of the middle class, and don't really want to strike. But when asked to allow families, whose sons and brothers have been killed by the cops, to address the rally, the bureaucrats said that there was no time left for the families to speak. So while the bureaucrats give token support to the idea of mobilizing the oppressed to support the unions, when it comes down to reality, they have torpedoed this critical requirement for victory. 3. To win, we need to stop the boss's government from using anti-labor laws to smash the strike. Governor Brown has already demonstrated that he will do whatever he can to prevent a BART strike, and the boss's politicians are already talking about passing new laws to ban public transit workers from striking. If passed as an emergency measure, such a law could take effect immediately. A strike is unlikely to last more than few days, before the bosses go to Sacramento and demand that the legislature give them the means to crush it. If that happens, the union's response must be, legally or illegally, we will stay off the job and on the picket lines until we win. We must say no to any sell-out and capitulation by the union leaders. Taking a militant stand, and defying any effort to use laws or court injunctions to break the strike, is the only way to turn the tide of repeated defeats that the working class has been suffering nationally. Not taking this bold move guarantees that the demoralization and defeat of the workers' movement will continue. If transit workers are barred from striking, how long will it be before all public workers, or even all workers, lose that right as well? If BART workers do not defy injunctions, will the ILWU be able to in 2014? We must start now to educate both the rank-and-file workers in the unions, and our allies in the oppressed communities, about the need to wage a militant strike, including staying off the job in defiance of any reactionary laws and injunctions. We understand that such a struggle could result in arrests of union leaders and militant workers. It also requires preparation for the possibility of physical battles with the police and any troops that the state sends to smash the strike. This is how our brothers and sisters built the unions in the 1930s, and it is the only way that we can stop the total rout of the trade unions today. Ultimately, we need to prepare for a general strike. AC transit workers already rejected the sell-out contract that their union bureaucrats tried to impose on them. All efforts must be made to build solidarity with AC transit workers, and coordinate our strike efforts. This could spark a massive solidarity strike by the entire union movement in the Bay Area. We need to defy and smash all reactionary laws, such as the federal Taft-Hartley Act, that forbids solidarity strikes. This is an all-out class war, and only one side will be victorious. All out for a massive general strike. All the unions and the oppressed communities, defend the BART union's right to walk out, and stay out until we beat our enemy. Defend George Figueroa. Stay out until he is reinstated with full amnesty.
The cowardice of the union bureaucracy, the BART strike that didn't happen from International Trotskyist, Fall 2013. The contracts of the union workers at Bay Area Rapid Transit BART expired at midnight on June 30, 2013. On July 1, the workers went out on strike, but after only a few days, the union leadership agreed to send them back to their jobs for 30 days while negotiations continued. The negotiations made little progress, however. On Thursday, August 1, BART workers and their allies held a rally in Oakland to demonstrate and galvanize public support for the planned resumption of the strike the following Monday, August 5. HWRS comrades attended that rally with our friends in Labor Black and Brown, a Bay Area organization that seeks to combat police brutality in the oppressed communities by forming alliances with Labor for Workers' Self-Defense. Our organizations produced and distributed a joint flyer. With the strike deadline looming, Governor Jerry Brown, a Democrat and supposed friend of Labor, appointed a team to report to him on the progress and status of the negotiations. As soon as Brown received the report, he went to court and got the judge, who held a hearing on Sunday, August 4, an almost unheard of accommodation, to issue an injunction preventing the workers from striking during a day cooling-off period. The union bureaucrats promptly capitulated. On Monday, August 5, at a rally and press conference outside BART's Lake Merritt Station headquarters, the local bureaucrats leading the BART unions ATU 1555, SEIU 1021 and UFSME 3993, supported by their cohorts from the Bay Area labor councils, announced their unconditional surrender to the governor's demand that the workers stay on the job during the so-called cooling-off period. This is a favorite dance the U.S. labor lieutenants perform with their capitalist masters, calling off strikes and demobilizing the picket lines because of government injunctions. The labor movement can only hope to challenge this and similar injunctions, including those issued under the federal Taft-Hartley law, with mass pickets and revolutionary labor action. The working class can draw the strength to muster such actions from its members and allies in the black and brown working class communities, which must engage in a battle for survival with the ruling class, its out-of-control police, and the beatings, killings, and mass imprisonment they inflict daily on the oppressed communities. At the start of the BART strike, the watchword was "Take Back Wisconsin," a reference to Wisconsin's passage of a law gutting the collective bargaining rights of state workers, which drew massive protests in early 2011. But at the August 5 press conference, Alameda Labor Council and SEIU honcho Josie Camacho made sure to change the script, stating, "This is a regional fight. It's a fight about maintaining middle-class jobs and standards." And then she had the gall to add that workers don't want to go on strike. Is that right? Middle class? Where have these bureaucrats been since 2008, while the firestorms of takebacks that refinanced Wall Street has ravaged our standard of living? The rank-and-file BART workers have to take control of this fight and of their destiny, resume the strike, and transform it into a political strike. Transit workers should join together to declare a strike movement that reaches out and appeals to the poor working-class public, especially the working-class black and brown communities, where the need to battle on a daily basis against the brutality of the police and la migris are crying out for the muscle of labor intervention. But right now, instead of defending the working-class communities and seeking their support, the BART union's leaders are making no-strike preparations for the showdown at the end of the court-ordered 60-day cooling-off period. The union's picket army has been demobilized in accord with Jerry Brown's wishes, and with pride card kisses. Months of preparation now lie in shambles. If the so-called leaders don't organize for the coming strike, who will? The rank and file must pick up the pieces, and start putting together strike committees now, with daily meetings open to all union members and their allies. The committees must make concrete plans to mobilizing worker and community support so that BART workers can go back out on strike and this time, stay out until their demands are met. There are militant fighters in other unions, and in the community who long to throw their lot in with the BART workers, not just to idly support them in principle, but to make an active commitment. The ATU, SEIU, and USME officials have shown themselves to be a clique, collectively incapable of organizing a real fight against BART management and its backers in the government, the court system, and the plutocracy. The situation cries out for new leadership. That will occur only if the rank and file manifest their desire to fight to win by taking over the fight, and forging links now with allies in the other unions and in the black and brown workers' movement and the oppressed communities. To win, BART workers must form an alliance with other transit workers, such as those who work for San Francisco Muni and AC Transit. Such an alliance would have the power to shut down the entire transportation system in the Bay Area, and force the ruling class to concede to all the BART workers' demands. But in order for such an alliance of unions to shut down the Bay Area, they need to be ready and willing to defy the state and its draconian anti-labor laws and injunctions. If the labor movement is to reverse the huge defeats it has suffered in the recent and not-so-recent past, there is no other way to do it. And since waging a united political strike requires workers to be prepared for a political and even military confrontation with the armed-to-the-teeth capitalist state, the labor movement needs the support of the entire working-class community. In particular, it needs to join forces with the black and brown working-class communities. This means that the picket lines and strike committees of such a political strike should extend to the black and brown workers' communities, to help them defend themselves against the police, as well as in their struggles around the many other issues arising from the oppressive institutional racism that the bourgeois state inflicts on their communities. This is what Workers' Defense Guards are all about. They defend both the striking workers and the oppressed communities. In so doing, they pave the ground for the formation of workers' militias, as the military arm of the working class as a whole.
November 6, 2013. An open letter to the members of the Transportation Workers Solidarity Committee. As you know, a controversy has arisen recently over the TWSC's decision to ban our comrade Charles Dubois from TWSC meetings. This controversy, and the accusations against Charles that are circulating because of it, are hurting our reputation within the workers' movement, distracting us from our political work, and worst of all, interfering with our ability to help the families of victims of police murder, by forging links between the labor movement and the oppressed communities. We are writing to seek a mutual resolution of this controversy in accordance with the norms of workers' democracy, as well as a clarification of the TWSC's official organizational position regarding Charles's attendance at its future meetings. First, we want to recap, objectively and factually, the sequence of events that generated the controversy. On October 1, 2013, Jack Hayman sent an emails addressed to Charles and his son Toussaint, expressly encouraging them to attend the TWSC meeting scheduled for the following evening, October 2. Hayman explained that he was seeking support for his position, that the TWSC should withdraw its support for the planned BART Workers' Solidarity Rally on October 8. At the time Charles received Hayman's October 1 email, neither Charles nor anyone else in HWRS or LBB was aware that TWSC had ever proposed or discussed excluding Charles from TWSC meetings, much less that any decision to do so had been made. In retrospect, Charles realized afterwards that starting sometime in January 2012, he had stopped receiving notices of upcoming TWSC meetings. However, until recently, Charles had not attached any particular significance to this. In the late morning of October 2, however, the members of HWRS, including Charles, received an email from our former comrade, Charles Ratchliss of the CWGUSA, with whom we have not been on cordial terms since his split from HWRS in mid-2012. Ratchliss's email said that during a rally at Chevron in Richmond on October 1, he had stumbled upon indications that the TWSC does not want to have Charles and Toussaint attending their meetings, and appeared to have made a conscious decision not to invite them. According to Ratchliss, during the rally, he asked 3 TWSC members, whom Ratchliss did not identify, about an upcoming TWSC meeting they were discussing, and one of them appeared anxious to prevent Ratchliss from learning about it. Ratchliss speculated that the reason for this was that the person was under the misimpression that Ratchliss was still a member of the same political organization as Charles. Ratchliss told us that someone from the CWGUSA had written to the 3 TWSC members in question to clarify that Ratchliss was no longer associated with HWRS or LBB, and that in that context, the CWGUSA had expressed disagreement with the exclusion of Charles from the TWSC. However, Ratchliss indicated that he had not done anything further about the matter. Charles and HWRS were skeptical of Ratchliss's report that Charles and Toussaint were not welcome at TWSC meetings, particularly as Hayman had just expressly invited them to attend the one on October 2. In any event, Charles, Toussaint, and Dov W. from HWRS attended the October 2 TWSC meeting without incident. They expressed political disagreement with some of the statements and decisions made at the meeting, but they did not speak out of turn or conduct themselves inappropriately. On Friday, October 4, Charles was notified that a TWSC subcommittee meeting, which had been scheduled for that evening, had been cancelled, along with a planned rally at Fruitvale BART on October 8, which was to be the subject of the Friday evening meeting. In the late morning on October 5, Charles sent an email to the TWSC, Hayman, and several other individual TWSC members, protesting the cancellation of the Friday meeting and the Fruitvale rally on the ground that the decision to do so was undemocratic. In the early afternoon, Hayman responded on behalf of the TWSC, explaining that Uri Hawley, who originally had the idea for the Fruitvale rally, had changed her mind, and decided it was not a good idea. The last paragraph of Hayman's October 5 email reads as follows: "By the way, nearly all TWSC members have criticized me for inviting you to our last meeting without first asking approval. They are right, and furthermore they've asked me to inform you that you are no longer welcome at TWSC meetings." Aside from Ratchliss's email, of which HWRS members were skeptical, this was the first time Charles or anyone in HWRS or LBB had been informed that there was any problem with Charles or Toussaint attending TWSC meetings. Hayman's email gave no reason why advance approval should have been required, Before Heyman could invite Charles to a TWSC meeting, no information about the identities of the nearly all TWSC members to whom Heyman referred, no indication as to when or how the decision to ban Charles had been arrived at, and no explanation whatsoever about why Charles was no longer welcome in the TWSC. Charles promptly responded to Heyman's email with an email protesting his exclusion from the TWSC, which Charles sent both to Heyman directly, and to the TWSC's organizational address. However, he did not receive any response from either. In the afternoon on the following day, October 6, Dov sent an email to Howard Keeler, Jack Gerson, and John Ryman, with a copy to the TWSC's organizational emails address. Dov's message quoted the part of Heyman's email regarding Charles's exclusion from the TWSC, pointed out that no reason for the exclusion had been given, protested it as bureaucratic, and closed by telling the three addresses Keeler, Gerson, and Ryman that Dov was asking them to intervene with Heyman and his clique to stop this exclusion, and that he was writing to you, because I think that you still have integrity. Dov's email also warned that HWRS will not tolerate this treatment. If we are forced to, we will conduct an all-out campaign against the exclusion. Keeler did not respond to Dov's October 6 email, and has not involved himself in this matter in any way, which is understandable in light of his age and personal situation. Both Gerson and Ryman, however, responded promptly, sending copies of their responses to all of the emails addresses to which Dov had sent his email. Both Gerson and Ryman indicated that they disagreed with the exclusion. Ryman added that in his view, Charles had not acted inappropriately at the October 2 TWSC meeting. Neither Gerson nor Ryman requested that his email to Dov be kept confidential. Even though both Dov's October 6 email, and Gerson and Ryman's responses of the same date, were sent to the TWSC's organizational email address, no one responded on behalf of the TWSC. On October 7, Dov sent an email to Gerson and Ryman, with a copy to the TWSC's address, thanking Gerson and Ryman for their opposition to the exclusion of Charles, and asking them to notify Dov of the next TWSC meeting. By October 12, 5 days later, neither Heyman nor anyone else acting on the TWSC's behalf had responded in any way to any of the emails Dov or Charles had sent to the TWSC's organizational address regarding Charles's exclusion from the TWSC. For that reason, HWRS concluded that in order to protest the exclusion effectively, we needed to communicate directly with the membership of the TWSC. However, we did not have any email list that we were confident would reach all, or at least most, of the people associated with the TWSC. For this reason, we decided to send our next communication to a list of emails addresses that Heyman had used to send invitations to Keeler's birthday party, as well as an additional list of people to whom Heyman had sent a TWSC flyer about the BART dispute on September 26, 2013. HWRS's email, which was sent out on October 12, included the text of Gerson's and Ryman's emails to Dov. It proposed that the way to resolve this is to open TWSC's meetings to everyone who wants to fight for the victory of BART and transport workers, and that TWSC should have clearly defined points of unity and democratic workers' organizational procedures for membership in the TWSC. HWRS's October 12 email generated a firestorm of heated discussion. Several people have sharply criticized HWRS for disseminating Gerson's and Ryman's October 6 emails without their permission, and for distributing the October 12 email to such a broad list of people. It is not the purpose of this letter to contribute further to the discussion, which appears to have distracted everyone, ourselves included, from what is really at issue here. To say that HWRS has apologized, repeatedly, for the one mistake we acknowledge having made, which was to disseminate our October 12 email to a large list, without first verifying that each person on that list was an appropriate recipient, that is, someone we knew or honestly believed was associated with TWSC. In any event, since October 12, the real issue became totally lost swirl of arguments about the breadth of the distribution list for HWRS's October 12 email, and its incorporation of Gerson's and Ryman's emails. The real issue always was, and still remains, whether Heyman was justified in telling Charles on October 5 that Charles should not have been invited to the October 2 meeting, and would be excluded from further TWSC meetings. This issue requires addressing such questions as the following. 1. When, how, and by whom was this decision was reached? Did the people who made the decision have the authority to act in this way on behalf of the entire membership of the TWSC, without bringing the matter to a vote of the entire organization? 2. What were their grounds for excluding Charles from the TWSC? Were they valid and sufficient? 3. Was it consistent with the principles of workers' democracy to reach the decision to exclude Charles from the TWSC without giving him any warning that this was being considered, without telling him what the reasons were, and without giving him any chance to defend himself? To that last question, we believe principled members of the workers' movement can have only one answer. No, whatever Charles may, or may not have done in the past, it was clearly wrong to bar him from future TWSC meetings, without giving him even the semblance of due process that is offered by the bourgeois system to those accused of wrongdoing, that is, notice of the charges against him, and an opportunity to defend himself. Moreover, in the course of the controversy surrounding this whole sequence of events, Charles and, either expressly or by implication, HWRS and LBB have been accused of disruptive behavior, threats of violence, disclosing potentially damaging information to the agents of the employers, and acting in a manner no different from what a provocateur would have done. The worst such accusations were those included in an October 12 email from TWSC member Peter Turner, which he later acknowledged was sent inadvertently, he claims as a reply all to the entire list that received HWRS's October 12 email. In his email, Turner said the following: in late 2011, at several meetings at Local 10 for organizing a support caravan to travel to Longview, I watched Charles intervene repeatedly with criticisms that were not constructive, and which were instead distracting and provocative. The pattern increased in intensity until he came to one meeting with a younger supporter, possibly his son, who I don't know personally, and began speaking out of turn. Any semblance of democratic discussion or elementary personal courtesy was abandoned, substituting implicit threats of violence. The conduct was so extreme that I suspected Charles of consciously acting in the interests of the employing class. His argument was basically that since the TWSC, or Local 10, or whomever his incoherence made his arguments unclear, would not charter buses, drive to West Oakland, and transport anyone and everyone who wanted to travel to Longview there at our cost, we were all racists. This argument was plainly irrational, race-baiting, and backed by an ultimatum: we agree to his demands or he would not let our meeting continue. After that I made my position known in an informal way. I believed that were we to continue planning for a caravan of supporters of Local 21, we needed to understand the need to exclude disruptors or agents of the class enemy, or those who effectively act in that role, from meetings. The Longview struggle was difficult. The federal government and its agencies of repression were using means to defeat us, and we needed strict discipline and an understanding of responsibility in situations where missteps would have undermined the struggle. Charles clearly was not qualified to continue in attendance. As a supposed revolutionary, he should have understood the ramifications of his conduct, and controlled whatever demons are driving him. But he did not, or could not. I am not as forgiving as some, including Jack, who have cut him slack for too long. That episode convinced me, but apparently not others. However, it was representative of a pattern of similar examples, and continued afterwards. I only cite the last example, because it's what stuck in my mind most. I have seen him continue and studiously avoided him. At the last TWSC meeting, others present cited other examples of similar conduct, that convinced most of us that the time had come to draw a line. Obviously, neither Charles individually, nor HWRS and LBB as organizations, are or should be required to accept this kind of calumny without defending ourselves. Moreover, there are those in the workers' movement who are prepared to stand behind Charles. Many activists who know Charles would characterize him as a passionate, principled, and dedicated supporter of workers and the oppressed communities, one who may voice political criticisms in strong terms, but who does not disrupt meetings, threaten violence to other members of a movement, or otherwise conduct himself inappropriately, and who would never, under any circumstances, consciously act in the interests of the employing class. A particularly vile accusation to make against a dedicated militant, especially without a factual basis. For example, Black Riders Liberation Party member Matrael Muhammad has this to say in response to Turner's description of Charles's behavior at the Longview organizing meeting, which he attended. I was present at the Longshore protest planning meeting of 2011 with Charles and his son. I am writing to make a testimony that the character assassination placed on Charles is completely fake, and sounds willfully motivated to purposely discredit Charles and LBB. Turner said, I watched Charles intervene repeatedly with criticisms that were not constructive, and which were instead distracting and provocative. This is nonsense. Charles spoke with a strong and noble stance that stood for the inclusion, extensive outreach, and organizing of the black and brown labor working class workers and solidarity of working class labor workers along all races. For UIE, Turner to use these false terms to describe Charles' position clearly translates that you suppose everyone's way of communication should be hegemonic as yours. From what I watched, Charles waited and listened patiently to speak after others, then he would motion to make a comment. Similarly, Richard Miller, who formerly worked in the workplace as Charles, and was in the same union AFSCME Local 444, had this to say about Charles in an email sent to many TWSC members and other labor activists on October 26. Charles and I have had fierce differences. I have not agreed with his approach on more than one occasion. I won't go into our differences, as that's not the point here, but I would not disagree with many people about his approach. But I will say this. Although Charles was around the Spartacist League, who had numerous people in my union, unlike them he actually fought the bosses, opposed them openly in his own right and through the union. When Charles Smith, who was also on the Transport Committee, aggressively and shamefully moved to kick John Ryman, who had devoted huge amounts of time to helping Local 444, from one of our membership meetings, Charles Dubois rose and spoke against this strongly despite his disagreements with John. It was not the norm for us to bar visitors from our meetings. I would agree with those that Charles can be frustrating. Believe me, I have a long experience with the brother. But he never went to the boss when he didn't get his way in the union, and he never used the union bureaucracy against union militants as Charles Smith, a vocal member of the committee, did. Charles would write up his stuff and openly in front of you hand it out, but that was his way. Go to the membership and let the chips fall where they may. During the Rodney King affair, we had a white worker who was almost beaten to death by 4 black youth. Dubois was a most vocal and active member, who was part of organizing a crew to help the man finish work he was doing on his home. I have seen union staffers and top bureaucrats at these TWSC meetings. How can someone like Dubois be barred and not them? I stress that there are times I dreaded the thought of going to a meeting and having to deal with Charles. I sympathize with some people about this. He can make meetings more difficult than they would be, there's no doubt about that. But I have never seen him disrupt a meeting in a physically harmful or deceitful way. He always abided by the vote in my experience. He demands his say like everyone else. I think that to exclude is justified if the committee is clear about its program, strategy and goals. You don't agree with this program and approach, then this committee is not for you. But I am not sure the committee is clear on this. If the picture of Charles drawn by El Muhammad and Miller is accurate, then Charles has done nothing that should warrant excluding him from participating in the TWSC and similar bodies. Yet, as we noted at the outset, having the kind of accusations against Charles made by Turner and others floating around unanswered interferes with our ability to conduct our practical work within the workers' movement and the oppressed communities. Indeed, we believe that by continuing to exclude Charles without giving any reason, and without giving Charles the opportunity to clear his name, the TWSC is risking harm to its own reputation. We are confident that the TWSC would not want to become known within the movement as a bureaucratic clique that responds to political criticism by silencing, smearing, and excluding its critics. Yet this is a conclusion many workers could draw, if they learned of TWSE's exclusion of Charles, and then read the statements by Meller and El Ahmad, that we have quoted above. In short, as long as the dispute between the TWSE and Charles remains unresolved, it has the potential to tarnish the reputations, and thereby impair the effectiveness, of everyone involved, including the TWSE. We believe it is in the interest of all concerned, therefore, to put this controversy behind us and get on with our respective tasks. Accordingly, by sending this email, we are asking that the TWSE convene a meeting, open to all TWSE members and all interested members of the workers' movement, at which representatives of the TWSE will explain the factual basis for the decision to exclude Charles from TWSE meetings, and Charles and his comrades and supporters will have the opportunity to dispute these facts, and to defend their reputations against the accusations that have been made against them since October 12. This email has one additional purpose. Charles was recently told by Stan Woods that his exclusion from TWSE meetings is no longer in effect. Charles has no way of knowing whether Woods' statement is authoritative or correct. We would appreciate it if Heyman, or someone else with authority to act on the TWSE's behalf, would inform us, officially, whether Charles will be able to attend future meetings of the TWSE. Sincerely, the members and supporters of HWRS.